Now we have it all rebooted. I have the Windows 10 install USB in place, and I've already hit escape after powering on the computer. So what you see here is the menu from the BIOS, which allows us to boot from an alternative device. Let me go down to the USB and see what happens. It would be very fast if I actually installed a solid state drive in here instead. I did think about it, but the budget it doesn't allow for it right now. If a lot more of you watch these videos, maybe someday I can. And now it's doing something. Okay, the initial setup screen. We will go ahead and next through this one. It is the proper language, time, and keyboard. We're going to tell it to install now. The actual setup program is now starting more fully. Okay, now, as I described previously, I had Windows 7 Professional installed on this computer. Now, I don't have the actual key to type in. I was looking for it, but I can't find the original card that came with it. Now, there is a tool that I will describe when I talk about tools in a future video called Bellarc, which can usually pull that key out of the registry. It's actually in the registry, but it's hard to decipher it. The binary format that they use is not easily understood. The tool Bellarc has to be installed, freeware tool, and it will usually pull out the key that you can use. I recommend you run that later, as I will when I run the tools, and save it, so in case you need that key in the future. But for now, I can go ahead and say I don't have a product key. And I will pick the Windows 10 Pro, and I know I had Windows 7 Pro installed. Next. Again, both 64 bits. Now we have to, scroll down through their agreement. You should read it. I've read it before, so I'm going to not waste your time with it in case you're in the same boat. And I'll just go ahead and accept that and then hit next. Always choose custom install. You never know when you decide that there's multiple partitions that you'd like to deal with or whatever. So when I click that, it shows all of the partitions that we currently have. There is a partition 1, and that is a special system partition used to recover from if the operating system ever becomes corrupted. Then there's partition 2, which is actually the primary partition which has all of the operating system on it. In this case, nearly 500 gigabytes. And then there's a drive 0, which is a drive 0 unallocated space. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to delete these other partitions, so we have an absolutely clean install. Delete it. When I delete that partition, we should see the unallocated space grow. And we did. Now it's up to 931, and I'll delete this system reserved one as well. Again, we're getting warnings each time, but now we have a completely clean hard drive. And what I'm going to do is create an actual partition. I don't want to use up the whole space right now for Windows 10. I want to use approximately half of it, just like I had with Windows 7. The other half I plan on using for a Linux load. And Ubuntu Unix actually has in the package an automatic boot manager. So it'll be able to boot from either one of the two operating systems once I do that. But for now, because you can usually resize these partitions later, but sometimes it's rather challenging to do that. And if you happen to have a lot of files on there when you finally decide to do it, any system files that got pushed way out into the space would prevent you from resizing it down too far. So this is the best time to do that. So I'll click New. It defaults to the full size of the hard drive that we have, the unallocated space. I am going to change this, let me see, 954 approximately. I'm going to make it, I'll make it an even 500 just to be safe. Linux actually uses a little bit less. So that's 500,000 megabytes, which is really 500 gigabytes. I'm going to apply that. Okay. It's going to be a warning about that. Okay, so now what it has done is it's created another system reserve partition for Windows 10, just like Windows 7 had, and it's created drive partition 2, which is the actual partition where all of the files will be stored that we are running with. Looks like almost the exact same sizes that we had before with the Windows 7, which I probably made the same judgment at that time. So with that, make sure that the partition 2 is highlighted, which it was by default, and I'll click Next. And now it's proceeding. Now it's going to copy all of the system files over from that USB onto the existing partition 2 that I selected. And once it's ready with that, it'll proceed to multiple phases of the installation. If this was a solid state hard drive that was in there, you would see this thing really copying these files rather rapidly. This particular computer does not have USB 3.0 or 3.1, so it wouldn't be as fast as a modern case and motherboard would be able to support it that had those types of USB capabilities. But it would still be very fast compared to what I have in here with the existing rotating hard drive. I guess I should explain further about the licensing. I expect that this will, since I had a legitimate legal license for Windows 7 on this system before, I expect that it will automatically activate Windows 10. It only does that once with that particular Windows 7 license. Microsoft has a database where they keep track of this. And it doesn't go by the hard drive. Some people have that misconception. It's done by the serial number of the motherboard. It's actually the model and serial number, which they keep in their database. So you could go ahead and replace this hard drive as many times as you want. And as long as you have the same motherboard, it'll install and activate. If you were to go ahead and change the motherboard out, then all bets are off. That's why it's recommended when you're building a new system that you don't activate it with your key until you're sure that that system motherboard is functioning properly. Because if you suddenly get a bad motherboard, then you'll have to call up Microsoft and explain to them the situation. They'll ask you the Windows 7 key that you had, and they will deactivate the Windows 10 from that system so that you can go ahead and replace the motherboard and reinstall it. And they will keep track of that, so you may have to call them back to close it out, but they will handle it properly as long as it was legitimately licensed Windows 7 or Windows 8 distribution. Okay, it's done with that. So now it'll move on to the next phases. It's already installed, it's installed the features already. Now it's going into installing some updates that it has to install just to get the drivers on that particular system to work. It wants to try to connect to the network. It wants to connect to the video properly. So it wants to make sure that it has the basic drivers to allow that to function. Now it is restarting. What I will do is I will pull my stick out at this point so that it doesn't come back up onto it. See, looks like it's activating the hard drive now. So we are actually booting from the hard drive at this point. I see the activity light come on. Oh, finally doing something different. Well, that's a good sign. Looks like it might be rebooting again. Yeah. The old HP BIOS screen. I do plan on doing a future video on some of the features of a BIOS. Not this old one, but some of the more modern ones, either Gigabyte or Asus or some of the others. There we go. Okay. Questions are coming up soon. Get ready to start answering them quickly so we can move on. Here we go. What's our region? Our region is the United States, so we'll say yes to that. We are US, I will say yes to that. I will skip the question about the keyboard layout. The default is fine. Well, now it's doing the network, and the network is a critical one. It doesn't always work because the base driver may not support it. Looks like this one might be working. Should, standard TrendNet video card. Okay, here we go. I want to set up for personal use, which is what it's set to now. Next. I want to do an offline account. It's up to you, but I have found that trying to do with the Microsoft account leads to some later confusion. It's much simpler and straightforward if you create offline accounts and move on from there. Do you want to sign on? It's double checking with me. I'll say no to that again. And now it's asking for me to pick a name. What is this going to be used for? What name do I want to use? I always create an account for admin. Well, it's by default going to be admin, the first one that gets created. But I'm going to create one that has my name and underscore. Now, once I have it up and running, I will create another account that is just David. That will be a standard user, however. So if I'm actually browsing the internet or doing anything that could in any way pose a risk where a virus could enter the system, including reading my email, then I will only use the David account for that. In a future video, I'll talk more about security, but that's the basic thing. I always create a minimum of 2 accounts. One for the username. It may not be me. I put together computers for other people. And I put underscore admin on that. And then for the actual person themselves without that, without the under admin. Now it's going to ask for passwords. Okay, I will go ahead and pick my password of the month. I have to record what months I use for, but I encrypt how I record them, just to let you know. So if I were to lose that file, I'd still be able to, and it got in the hands of the wrong person, I'd still be able to know that it's safe. This is new at Windows 10. It's going to ask you these 3 security questions. Might as well go ahead and do it. I don't think it lets you do it without it, does it? Yeah, it says it's required. So we got to pick a security question. They give you a list of possible ones. I like to pick the school I attended. In this case, Andrew Thomas. Security question number 2, I'll pick where my parents met, Missouri. You're asking yourself if these are the right questions. I'll have to admit to you they're not. I'm going to change them later. But that's what I want to demonstrate here. And then, of course, what is my nickname? I will repeat that. You can figure it out yourself. Now you get a bunch of options. this new personal assistant, Cortana. Personally, I'm not a fan of that. I'd rather do things on my own without constantly being told what I should be doing, so I do not accept that. I decline it. Do I want more across devices with activity history? No, I do not. That's just going to eat up processor time. This one can't even afford it. Now, all of these questions, you can go ahead and read through them. My default by now is to say no. I have some people that have said no, and then later on they've changed their mind. That's fine. You can always change these at a later date. No harm. And we'll just make sure we get them all to no. That's the quickest way to get this thing up and running. And we're off and running, as if we had just logged in for the first time. So when you create a new user, they're going to see the same thing. To reiterate, I highly suggest you use user accounts where everybody has their own. One of the things that a virus can still do to you with all the virus protections that you want to put in there, it still has the ability to corrupt your desktop profile. Matter of fact, to somebody that's happened to already, I'll usually recommend that they create two when they replace it. A new profile and then a secondary one, like Lena and then Lena 2 as an example. And we wind up having to delete the one that was corrupted by the virus. It usually damages it to the point where it can't be retrieved. But it will not damage anything other than that, unless you're the administrator, which I've already said. You should not do normal functions, internet, email, when you are the administrator. When you install new software and you are not the administrator, you will get a prompt to enter the administrator's password. If you have only one administrator on the system, it'll be that account's password. It'll show you the name of that account. In my case, for this one, it'll be David under admin when I'm running as David and I try to install something. I just enter that password, which is different from my everyday user account, and then it proceeds with the install. If you are the administrator, Windows 10 does house the video because it finally downloaded the proper video driver. That's what that blinking was for. But Windows 10, it'll still give you a secondary prompt even if you are the administrator, but it's too easy to actually click through that. You know what I mean? If you have to enter a whole new password, you'll stop and think about it. And here we are.